Everybody, welcome back. This is Coach Rob and another Coach's Log. I hope you enjoyed the most recent Coach's Log and some of the webinars that we've done recently. If you have ideas or suggestions for new content, let me know. Got questions about what's been recorded? Feel free to leave a comment. I will answer your questions. So today what I want to talk to you guys and gals about is why I require my athletes to use a power meter. That is for both cyclists and runners, which surprises a few people. I coach everyone from elite competitive athletes all the way down to recreational runners and cyclists. That doesn't necessarily mean that they don't compete, but maybe they don't compete as regularly as high of a level. We're going to start this off with one of my favorite quotes, and that is, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And that comes from Peter Drucker. If you're not familiar with Peter Drucker, have a look, see what you can find out about him. He's a very interesting figure in modern business. New runners and cyclists traditionally are going to start with things like RPE, perceived exertion, heart rate, speed, cadence, distance, as their measures for progress. How am I improving? Yesterday, my heart rate was higher or lower. Today, I was able to go another mile in my run or 5 miles on my ride, whereas the previous week, I could only do X number of miles. That is a great place to start. But eventually, as your focus moves from that rudimentary measure to more performance-oriented measures, you're going to have to move to power. And here's some of the reasons why. One, RPE, or perceived exertion, is incredibly subjective and wildly inaccurate. And why is that? Well, you're like, well, that felt hard. Well, your hard versus another person's hard is completely different. So when I speak to someone and they speak very subjectively about performance or an outcome in a competition, a workout, and they say that that was incredibly hard, when I have power data, I can look at that and say, yeah, that was hard. Or no, you may be tired because you did that same work last week and didn't have that same complaint. The next thing that others were going to gravitate towards are going to be, it's kind of a toss-up, which one happens first, speed and cadence or heart rate. But heart rate is impacted by so many variables, everything from weather, hydration, terrain, and it's very, very difficult because heart rate is not super accurate. It's better than perceived exertion. It's definitely going to support what we do in a practice where we're using power, and it does help us with things to learn about recovery and progress. But when you look at instantaneous numbers, one of the problems that we have with heart rate is the lag. So you start your interval, and the interval is expected to be a zone 3, zone 4 interval. And as you start maybe in zone 2, and halfway through the interval time, you finally get your heart rate up to zone 4. Was that an effective use of your time? Did you put enough strain in? Was it too much strain, too much work? It's very difficult to work with heart rate data effectively. Now, speed and cadence, they really don't prove that you're getting stronger or faster. Variables such as terrain and weather, just like with heart rate, also play a major role in this. So if you just happen to have a slow week last week, maybe your cadence was down and your speed was down, and then the following week you find your cadence is up and your speed is up. Well, last week you were in the hills, this week you were in the flats. It's not a one-to-one comparison. And finally, distance. It's not a true measure of work completed. It really isn't. Yes, you went longer, you went further. Did you do as much work? We'll never know unless you have a power meter. I have been in long rides that felt like they took an eternity. And then when I got back and I looked at the actual kilojoules, the total work produced for that effort, and compared it to maybe a moderately shorter ride or maybe even a longer ride, to find out that actually, that really was a lot of work because I produced more wattage. So this is another quote that I want to leave with you guys and gals that I think is very important to kind of put a ribbon on this or a bow on this as we go into why you want that power meter and why I require it. Well, the goal is to turn data into information and information into insight. This is a quote from Carly Fiorina, the former CEO of HP. Lots of great quotes from Carly over the years. Definitely someone that I've appreciated as a technology consultant. Here's my first one. This is a quote that was given to me a very long time ago. I wish I could say who it was, but 200 watts, 200 watts. So regardless of terrain, regardless of hydration, your nutrition status or your fueling status, your where you are in a race, no matter what, the wattage you're putting out is the wattage that you're putting out. Now, I realize that power meters, they're not perfect. They are fallible. There are some power meters that are better than others. As a matter of fact, let's add that as one more requirement. If you're going to work with me as an athlete, you have to have a direct force power meter. I don't go so far as to say that thou shalt not use a one-sided crank, left power meter scenario. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the other products that don't use direct force measurement, I'm not as interested in. Smart trainers that don't use a direct force set of sensors or strain gauges, if you like, that's fine. That's totally different. They're much, much, much better solutions than what we have available to us outdoors in the field when we come to indirect measurements of power. So power meters remove excuses. They're not affected by outside variables and provide instant performance measurements. And we'll back that up a little bit. There are some cases in some older generation power meters where temperature would impact a power meter. And quite often you would have to wait 10 to 15 minutes before the start of the ride. Maybe you'd have to do a coast down before, which is just a way of telling the power meter what's going on. Nowadays, a lot of modern power meters don't require a lot of calibration. So when you go into a current generation power meter from any of the brands, temperature compensation is built in, and a lot of them don't require daily calibration, weekly, monthly, quarterly, maybe even just annually. There are even some that make claims that there is no calibration required. I ride on one. It's a Power to Max S series. It's not current. That would be the NG Eco or the NG. And so far, so good. Those numbers have been very consistent and incredibly accurate compared to other devices that I have available to me to check. No more guessing. That's the reason really to have a power meter. Am I or am I not getting the work done? This will lead to lots of questions from athletes when they see maybe the average power of a ride and it comes across their bike computer instantaneously. And that's exactly what's going on. And they're like, oh, I can't control it. It's all over the place. No, you're not going to be able to, quite honestly. But what we look at is a 3-second averaging of the power as it comes in, and that helps smooth it. And it's a little bit easier to manage that flow of information that's hitting you. I will say this, if you're new and you've got a power meter and you just started using it, give it some time. You're going to find that eventually you're going to start seeing patterns. If you're a smart person and pattern recognition is something that you understand, you're going to start to be able to interpret what you're seeing. Now, eventually you're going to get to a point where some of it becomes overwhelming, and that's where a coach comes in. I've been coaching athletes with power for years, and there's all kinds of things that I can help you remove the guesswork from when you're trying to learn how to use that power meter. Your power meter becomes your alarm. Are you doing enough work? Are you meeting your performance goals? Are you doing too much too soon? Is it time for a rest? A power meter, believe it or not, can tell you that. Now, the power meter itself isn't going to speak up to you and say in so many words, Rob, you need a rest. Instead, it's going to do just the opposite. It's going to just spew a bunch of numbers to you, and you have to have the requisite software and the knowledge of how to use the reports in that software to make a determination of I'm overtrained or I'm approaching becoming overtrained. And there's all kinds of rules around that. And quite honestly, that falls under what we call performance management. Not the prior webinar where we were talking about sports management, how a coach works with an athlete, but we're talking about the athlete's specific performance management charting. How much training stress have you had immediately versus long-term, long-term versus short-term? How well recovered are you? Are you actually gaining fitness? Are you losing fitness? What's going on? So that's where the power meter is just a tool. A power meter doesn't make you faster. the data that it spews at you immediately is not going to be understood. You're going to need to take time. You're going to need to read a lot. You're going to need to invest in some books. You might be a business intelligence expert. You might be an analytics expert. You might be doing all kinds of things in statistics and demographics. It may come to you faster than someone who has no experience in numbers crunching, but you're going to quickly find that over time, you're going to need some assistance to learn more. And hopefully this kind of helps you get there. But I want you to understand, in the end, power meters will inform decisions of athletes and coaches. That's what they're there for. And if you need to learn more about how to use a power meter effectively, or you want to start doing power-based training as a cyclist and a runner, let me know. I can help you with that. The other thing too that I'll add to this is that the data that you collect can tell you a lot about how you stack up against your competitors, or how you might be able to improve your times on climbs. As a recreational cyclist, you'd be surprised how many that I've coached that are very concerned about performance. They want to have a faster century. They want to do things like that. And I've been able to slice and dice their data and provide them with an actual plan of attack the day of a century so that they can cut minutes or even longer, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, up to an hour off of their best previous times. Now, an hour is probably pushing it for most, but in some cases that has happened. And same thing goes with racing. I can tell someone who's racing in a mass start, elbow to elbow race, glance down at your bike computer every now and then. If you see the following numbers, you're going way too hard. You need to back off just a little bit and find shelter and hide. Runners, oh my gosh, it's almost like cheating. Having power on your run is amazing. You have the ability to monitor and pace yourself significantly more effectively than you ever could with a heart rate strap. So I hope this helps you understand why I require my athletes, cyclists and runners specifically, to have power meters in this practice. And this video really is meant for them. Quite often I have to explain to people why they have to have them. It's becoming less and less frequently that I do, but it's still important that I have this video in place for those folks that are coming on to the practice, or maybe thinking about getting into a different sport. Maybe they were a runner, had a power meter, and now they want to understand why they need one for cycling, or vice versa. That's what this is for. I hope you guys had a great training week, and I hope you guys keep up with it, and we'll talk again very soon.